someone, for instance, because of this, because of their inability to recognize, where things are in space, sometimes there might be something going on the TV, and they start to think that's reality. So you might, if you're hearing some stories, maybe if grandma's still at home or something, and TV's on a lot during the day, and you're hearing some wild stories, it might be because she's watched some of that stuff on TV and she's remembered some of it and kind of created some stories in her mind. But again, that can be either a good thing or a bad thing. It might make them comfortable. On the other hand, if it's a show that's a little overstimulating, or some of these shows these days, you think, oh my goodness, you don't want them to get upset by it either. So keep that in mind. And also, they easily become lost, and so you want to be careful of that. Also, in that parietal lobe, it's where we're able to perform tasks that require us to comprehend our relationship to objects. For instance, if you're going to go put a coat on someone with Alzheimer's, and maybe the sleeve is right here. I need another arm, excuse me. But maybe the sleeve is right here, and you see, they just keep missing it. Because again, their vision is just off, so you might just have to hold their hand. In fact, in the later stage, they actually lose the ability to understand where they are in space. Like their hands, they don't really know where the ends of their hands are. So you just gently putting your hand on there can be very helpful to them and help them be a little more orientated to their environment. Also in that parietal lobe, our ability to do things in sequence. So things like getting dressed. Sometimes we've seen maybe a woman that's got her clothes on and her undergarments on the outside. Again, she's not trying to be odd or make a statement. Like some of these stars today, I was just listening on the way here to this radio program about Lady Gaga. Now, she's going to be hard to tell because some of those rock stars are wearing their undergarments all over anyway. But anyway, so that's something we have to do in sequence, and that becomes affected. Also something like making coffee or making toast. We have to do things in sequence, and they lose the ability to do that. The ability to put words and numbers together, which affect reading and writing, and the ability to do calculations. So that's another one of the things that families recognize quite often first is the bills are not being paid like they used to be. The checkbook is not being balanced as it once was. Those are some of the first things that we're going to notice. And this is interesting too, in that parietal lobe, it's also where we interpret pain pressure. And this is a major issue, well, really throughout the disease, but especially in that late stage, as they're not getting up and moving around anymore, and they're more susceptible to, maybe pressure sores or something like that. But really all the way through it, in the middle stage and late stage, again, they're having problems with communication, right? They can't come up with the right words, and so they might be having a terrible, let's say, stomach ache. Well, or pain in this area. And if they could say, oh my gosh, I've got such a bad pain in this area, it's just terrible. If they could say that, we could say, well, you know what, you have had several bladder infections, I think we need to get you to a doctor. Well, because they can't say that, you might see them acting out, with anger, maybe throwing things like that. And that's so sad because they're not able to interpret where the pain is. And they're also not able to communicate it to you. So in that middle and late stage, we need to be detectives really in trying to figure out what's going on. If there's a change in behavior or you're just noticing some other things, we want to sit down and figure out what do I think is going on here, because again, they're not able to tell you that they're in pain. Alzheimer's disease itself does not cause pain, but of course as we age, darn it, we experience different aches and pains, don't we? And again, things like bladder infections are very common, unfortunately, in older adults, and so that's a real possibility. So you just want to be aware of that. And then it moves to the occipital lobe, and that primarily is where the brain processes information from the eyes. So the eyes take pictures of things, and then the brain has to interpret or process that. And so that's where they lose the ability to recognize objects, what you're supposed to do with them. Maybe they could have their car keys and they think, well, what do I do with these? Also, they have difficulty later in the later stages recognizing faces, even of the people that they love the very most, which is just heartbreaking. The occipital lobe is also where we get our color discrimination, so they eventually lose the ability to distinguish colors. Discrimination of movement. And it's not uncommon, it does not happen all the time, but it's not uncommon for people with Alzheimer's to have some visual hallucinations. Again, it could very well be that the brain is not interpreting what the eyes are seeing. So we want to go through a list of possibilities, like maybe it was a shadow that they thought was a man, or the curtain was blowing in the wind and they thought it was someone or something over there. So again, a lot of working with people with Alzheimer's, whether it's a loved one or professionally, it's being a detective. Because again, they lose the ability to tell us what's going on, so we have to observe and observe and observe and figure out what's going on. And as I said earlier, and you alluded to that, this is a general pattern of how it progresses through the brain. But yeah, we could have people in the same stage of Alzheimer's and yet look fairly different. One man said, once you've seen one person with Alzheimer's, you've seen one person with Alzheimer's. Which makes it a challenge. It is a terminal disease, and depending on the source, it's now considered to be anywhere from the 4th to the 7th leading cause of death in adults. So again, it's an issue we've got to take care of. I believe that they will. One man had a friend with Alzheimer's, and he summed it up really well, I thought. He said, the effects of Alzheimer's are like a book. The pages are being torn out one by one until all you have left is a cover. Sums it up pretty well. Do we have any questions on that part? I'm going to talk for a few minutes about communication because it is such a huge part of this disease. And we can really improve the quality of life for our loved ones with Alzheimer's if we learn how to really communicate and respond appropriately. But did you have any questions on the little tour of the brain there? Yes?
You know how they have all these drugs that are out now, like Aricept and these Alzheimer's drugs? How does that help and affect this function?
Yeah. Talking about the medications that are available today, well, there are 4 medications in our market today that they unfortunately don't stop Alzheimer's disease. They don't reverse it at all. But the general thought is that for many people, it will slow down the progression of those symptoms for a couple of years.
Will it make them want to sleep all the time?
Will it make them want to sleep all the time? Well, it depends. I mean, the most common side effects of the medications are like stomach upset. But we know that with different medications, they affect people differently. And, if you are concerned with that, I would certainly talk to the doctor. It's not uncommon that people in that middle stage and beyond do start to sleep more and more. That's not uncommon. Their days and nights can get mixed up. But also when the brain stem is affected, and that's actually one of the first things as well, it will affect their sleep patterns. They're not sleeping like they used to. So, you want to try to figure out, is it part of the disease process or is it a side effect of a medication? So I would talk to your doctor and try to figure out, now when did that start? Was it right around the time we put them on the medication? Or
The medication hasn't been changed since I've known the person.
Okay, so it's been quite a while.
But after breakfast, a nap. After dinner, a nap. After supper, barely to 8 o'clock.
Yeah. So when that happens,
all night.
They do sleep all night? Okay, that's a good question because we want to make sure that they are sleeping at night. Because if they're sleeping all day or throughout the day and they're not sleeping at night, if there's a caregiver that is suffering because of that, if they're not getting their sleep at night because of it, then we need to try to turn it around. But the fact that he's sleeping through the night would tell me that he probably, for whatever reason, needs that rest. So again, I would let the doctor know. When there's a change like that, you want to let the doctor know. But it's not uncommon that that will happen as the disease progresses.